Hello again and welcome back to my channel. I've just downloaded a software called CapCut, and I thought I'm going to go through some old videos and do some recording over the top of them, because when I took this video it was just me and Paul just walking around and talking and things, and we didn't really know the story of the place, and we were living in that area at the time, so this had been going back to about 2016, and this was located near a place called Portavadie on the west coast of Scotland. And I thought, this is really interesting because it no longer exists. And when we were going round it at the time, we felt like we were being really naughty, because obviously it's an abandoned place and it was full of signs saying no trespassing, keep out. And so when I was filming it, I didn't know who it belonged to and the background of it and everything else. But it's a really interesting place, and it's interesting because it no longer exists. And so not many people would have even known this place was there. So I think it was demolished a few years ago. And I was looking up the history of the place, and it was always uninhabited. So this is really interesting, because some of the places that we went inside had furniture. And so I thought people did actually live there, but they didn't. So it's a 1970s village, and it looks like a concrete jungle, and it's a real eyesore. And when we were going there, I said, you just felt oppressed when you was there, even though the location was beautiful because it was right by the sea. It was right by Portavadie, which is a beautiful marina, and they'd just built a new complex when we were there. So I think the hotel was quite new, and it was just beautiful. And then this eyesore sat a few minutes away from it. And I did some research on this just recently, and this was constructed in the 1970s for oil rig workers. So this is on the Cowell Peninsula in Argyll and Bute, Scotland. And it was built to house 500 oil rig construction workers. And it was never occupied because the expected oil boom failed to materialise, and the entire concrete complex was demolished in 2016 to clear land for future redevelopment. So we must have got there just before that happened. So it was built between 1975 and 1977, and it cost roughly £1.5 million. And the design included 19 residential blocks, a central 3-storey building, a cafeteria, a bar, a hospital unit, and fully made beds ready for workers. But the downfall is the changes in oil platform designs and safety cost issues meant the nearby construction yard received 0 orders. And it's known as the ghost status because not a single resident ever lived there, leaving the buildings to decay. It's actually quite sad when you think about it, because we've got a massive housing shortage, and even though these places were a massive eyesore, I'm sure people who are homeless or desperate for housing would have appreciated somewhere to live. So it's actually quite sad that that was allowed to be left to rot the way it was, and no one was ever put in there. And it is quite sad because when we were walking around the place, we noticed the cafeteria. It was more like a canteen. It was massive. And obviously they had a big kitchen there as well, where they would have cooked for a lot of people. And so I think all the units were really oppressive because they were so small. But obviously what they had in mind is that all these people would be out at work a lot, if you're working on an oil rig, you're not always at home. So you would only come back for a few weeks at a time, maybe, and then you'd be back out again. And so I think the way that it was done is that they made it so that people were only literally sleeping there, and they didn't put kitchens and things in most of the units, probably because they thought there's no point, because we will just provide the food in the canteen. And so it was just basically like a load of bedsits. Now, what did surprise me is that we went in a few of these places, and some of them did have like cots and little beds for children. And so they will have been made for their families maybe as well. And that changes the whole story, because there's a big difference between a single guy going to work on an oil rig and coming back for a few weeks at a time and having a bar close to hand and a canteen and a laundry and just needing a bed to sleep in, and having a family, because that changes everything. If you've got children and a partner and they're at home while you're on the rig, that changes the whole story of the place, and that makes it oppressive, because it was just like a concrete jungle when you're walking around it. It was so tight and close together, and it felt like there was no air, and there was no privacy, there was nowhere to play. It was quite a bleak feeling to it. Like it, even though it was a ghost town, it felt like a ghost town. And so I couldn't understand how they had children's things there, because that meant they obviously would have had families staying there as well if it had have been opened. And that, I just feel like people would have suffered from mental health problems living in a place like that, because it's just so oppressive. But it's saying on here later years and demolition. So the art canvas in 2009, international artists covered many of the derelict concrete walls in colourful graffiti and murals. And as we're walking around, you can see that. Some people go, oh, it looks like Banksy's been there, like, graffiti artists. And it was actually really interesting, because some of it was quite political as well, the murals and things. But you could see that these people were really talented artists as well. But it was just interesting, because it's like they're going in there to this blank canvas of concrete jungle, and then they're trying to put their own mark on it and trying to bring it to life, maybe. But it says it became a famous, eerie destination for photographers and explorers. And when we were there, we came across a few people who were doing the same thing. But when we saw each other, we sort of all stood still looking at each other like rabbits caught in the headlights. And then we realised we were all filming, so we just chilled out and went our own way. But we were all waiting to get done. So we felt quite naughty going around it. But it says that the empty structures were finally torn down to pave the way for local clean-up, housing and distillery project proposals. Now, I would actually like to go back there at some point and see what it's like now, because I don't know if they have built anything on it, and if they have, what is it like? So it does say that there are development plans for the place, so I don't know what is going on there. But as you're going through the video here, you can see, I mean, it was quite a big complex, but they were all very close together. And the way that it was built, there wasn't much natural lighting inside the buildings. And that's what gave it the feeling of oppression, because a lot of these houses and flats were very, very limited with light. The windows were quite small. On some of them, there were more like bedsits. So you'd go into the door and you were literally in the room, but the room had a kitchenette. And the room was so small, it would only have a small two-seater settee, or maybe a chair and a coffee table, and that was the size of the room. So they weren't much bigger than a caravan inside some of these. And it's actually interesting because I wonder who would have allocated who to where, because the very small place would have been for like one single person, but would that have been somebody on a lower level job? And would the houses have gone to somebody in higher management or things? But they were all equally as oppressive, to be fair. I mean, you're looking round there, it's just bleak, isn't it? It's just battleship grey. The dogs loved it. I loved it because I love urban explorations. I love this. So that's just going through one at doors now. I'm just going to try and remember what was going on there. But yeah, that's the laundry, look. So they've painted the washers and dryers. But those machines were massive. And when you think about it, they've never been used. So they could have been sold even and gone to somewhere, like a charity somewhere or whatever. But it's just a shame. They always manage to find money to build things, but they didn't actually do anything with it to help normal people. If they'd have painted all the concrete white, it would have felt a little bit brighter and a bit more less oppressive. And maybe some people would have not minded living there, but they could have put lots of flowers outside and bushes, and they could have made it nice, put some play areas and seating areas outside. But obviously they didn't finish it, so you don't know what they would have done if they had have put people in there. Maybe they would have done that. But when the lights were out, you can see how dark it is in a lot of these places because the lighting was limited because of the small windows. So you're walking around and you think, gosh, if there'd have been a power cut anyway, it'd have just all plunged into darkness because it was already dark. And they all had like electric meters put in and everything, so everything was in place for people to live there. But obviously no one ever did. But then when we went in some of the places, they did have furniture, and it did look like the offices were in use at some point because there were paperwork there and filing cabinets and things. And so it did look like there had been some life going on in there. So maybe they were just starting to get things set up there, and it just never really came about. Now, I think this place here was maybe the dining room. I think it is. I think that was the canteen because you can see the counter there. And it was massive inside that. And there was quite a bit of light in there as well. And yeah, you can see the serving hatches. So that was the canteen. So that's why they didn't bother making kitchens in a lot of the places, because you would have just had all your meals for free or subsidised. But that was the kitchen. So they would have employed a team of people to look after the oil rig workers, and so they will have had canteen staff and cleaners. And they did also have a bar, but I don't remember seeing that. It'll come up on the video at some point, but it's saying that they had a bar. And this is going through, yeah, that's still the canteen, so you can see they would have had big windows there, and that's looking down towards the sea. So that would have been quite a nice view. And there would have been a lot of camaraderie in the canteen and the bar because they'll have all been hanging around together. So you can see that that place itself would have been buzzing. It's the housing itself that's a different matter. I mean, when you look at it, it almost looks like a prison camp. I mean, a lot of these windows look like they had bars on them. So that was the canteen. There's my child. She's gone now, love her. So when you look back, bless them. So yeah, that's where they'd have all gone for the breakfast, dinner, tea, when they was not working on the oil rigs. There'd have been a lot of chit chat in there and laughter and stuff. But you can see that it could have worked. But £1.5 million at the time. Doesn't actually sound a lot for the amount of housing and space that it took up. But like I said, it's such a shame when there's people homeless. If that had been looked after, that could have housed a lot of people, even if it was only temporary. You know, if people are desperate enough, they'll live in a bedsit or a small flat until they get a house somewhere else. So it's a shame. It really is a shame that it just never came to anything. And it just shows that there's money for things when people want something bad enough. So that's going down outside of the canteen now. And I remember there being loads of phone boxes somewhere, but look how oppressive it looks. It's so bleak. Even though the ground looks like it's concrete. Look at the tiny little windows. I mean, these are supposed to be homes. Would you want to live in a house like that? I mean, look at them. They are so small. And they were all different sizes, and they were all laid out differently. And some were bleaker than others, but they were all bleak. I mean, even the ones that you would have said they were the best housing in the complex, they were still quite miserable, really. So I think this is where the phone boxes was supposed to be. I think they would have had proper telephones back then, because we didn't have mobile phones in the 70s. So I think that's where they'd have put all the phone boxes for people to contact families and stuff. But look at it. It is so oppressive. Even watching this video makes my heart sink. It's like, what kind of feeling do you get from this? You're doing this walk around and you're like, show me somewhere that my heart just goes up. Do you know? It's like every time we went round a corner, it sunk a little bit more. But look at the artwork; it's really cool. But yeah, there's a lot of red brick inside the main buildings where the offices and things were. But the housing itself was all like concrete. But it would have been interesting to see if it had have been gone to the full extent of what they was going to do, how it would have looked. But there was a lot of steps leading up from one level to another as well, like as you can see there. So it was on like a hill, and you can see there's a lot of rubble around, so it's obviously started to decay a lot at this point as well and fall down. But I'm trying to see where that's heading down. It looks like that one's facing down towards the sea. It was quite muddy in places as well, even though it hadn't been raining, so I don't think the drainage was very good. It's quite funny because when we were walking around, you could see how easily you could get lost as well. You'd have to have been there for a while to know which direction you were going in, because it was just like a warren. And because everything looked the same, it was hard to get your like bearings on where you was. So this is coming back outside again. I'm just talking all the way through this because I love talking, as you can tell. But I think that was going over towards the offices or the flats, because they had a mixture of bed sits. I think 1-bedroom flats, 2-bedroom flats. I can't remember there being a house, but I think there were housing, but only a few. So they'd have been for the families. No, this is a house, a flat. So this is going up the steps to that. But look at the artwork though, it's really cool. They've left the mark before it left, but look at this. Right, so yeah, there's your living room there. This was one of the bigger ones as well. So they have put furniture in some of the places. And I don't know if that's just to show you what it could look like. But you can see there's only like, oh, there's a couple of windows there, but where's that leading off to? That looks quite big, so I think that was one of the biggest. That must have been like a house. That's quite big, but the bedrooms were very, very small though. So I think that was a bedroom. You've already gone through the lounge part. But what's through this way? I think that was another bedroom. very, very small bedrooms. Yeah, so I think that was, I don't know if that was a bedroom or a lounge. I can't make out what it is. There didn't seem to be much planning involved in the housing itself. They didn't go out of the way to make them look comfortable or design them in a way that they worked for people and families, because they don't have gardens, they don't have anything out there. Look, you're just coming straight out of your door to a concrete staircase, straight downstairs. Where would you have sat and chilled out and got some sunshine? And it's just, maybe they would have put things in there, but you can see all the ground was all concreted as well, pretty much. It was all tarmacked off. So they didn't make much way for anything green or any focal points that would make it feel a bit nicer. So it reminds me of an estate back home in Halifax where they built it, and it was called Abbey Park, and that was the same kind of thing. It was built in the 70s, and it was very, very oppressive, and all the housing had flat roofs, so they didn't have a roof structure, and the roofs were made from concrete, and I thought they were ugly as. And you had, half of them was grey like this, and the other half were black. And they all had tiny little gardens, but they were so small, very small, and all the houses were faced onto each other like a rabbit warren, same as this. And it just gives that illusion of just no one cares. Because if you care about people, you give them space, you give them something beautiful to look at, you give them a place that can feel like a haven. And when things are thrown up like this, it's like we don't really care about your mental health, because you could see that people would suffer living here after a while. I would, even walking around it. I'm saying I'm so glad I didn't get offered something like that. I think what we're looking at there is one of the houses, so you can see the windows would have been bigger there. But just look at, you're just looking at concrete. That's all it is. And it's just really, it just looks, don't you think it looks bleak? And then you're going down the hill there in quite muddy. Can you imagine when they come out of the bar and they're all drunk and like, I've got to walk home, and they're going, which one's mine? I can't remember. And they'll probably get to a point where they'll say, just go to the nearest one and just doss there, because it'd take you a week to find where your house was. So this one, that's going down towards the, I think that one's looking at the sea, but those are the flats. But they are bleak as, honestly. So this is going, I can't believe how young he looks. That was my mate, Paul. We're going back some flipping years here. Well, that's what, nearly 10 years ago. So I think down there, if I remember rightly, it was really hard to walk down, because it was like there'd been a little bit of a landslide, and it was quite muddy and slippy. And I was probably saying to dogs, be careful, because I think there was broken glass as well. We tried to get round all of the complex, but I don't think we made it right down to all of it, because it was quite bleak. And the lower down you got, the more it felt like it wasn't safe underfoot. So I think these ones were down more towards the shore side. But if you look at the windows, right, when you're inside, those windows are high up as well. So when you sat down on a settee, the windows are up, not at eye level. And that makes a difference as well. So the light is coming in from a higher point of the wall, which just makes it feel even more oppressive, because what you're looking at, windows are meant to be looked out of, but I think they should be looked out of while you sat down as well as stood up. And these were mostly, you could only see out if you stand up and look out of the window, rather than if you sat down chilling out. I mean, look at the size of this place now. this is absolutely tiny, and you won't believe how small. Look at the size of the bedroom. It's like they've got a single bed built into the wall there, and there's only enough room for like a pair of drawers or something, and then that's the living room. And look how high the window is. So when you're sat down, you're not even able to look out of that window. And then you go through here, and I think through there they had a small bathroom, if I remember, but it's not showing up great because it was so dark inside. But it really was bleak. Lots of damp, obviously, because they never got lived in. But I think they'd have been damp anyway, to be honest, because of all the concrete. I don't think they'll have been made with much insulation, and the floors were concrete, so they'd have been very cold in winter, I should imagine, and not very hot in summer, because the heat obviously comes through the windows, and these don't have many windows that allow the sun to come through. So as I was going round them, I remember saying to Paul, "Could you live in this?" And he's going, "No." And I'm saying, "There's no way I could cope with this. I would just crack up living like that," because it was just so oppressive and so small. So that was one of the smaller ones. That is actually the living room. And as you can see, there's no kitchen. And that is obviously because they wouldn't have needed to cook, because it'd have all been put on for them. So it's very, very basic standard housing, but it's just depressing. Even if you were just staying there for a few weeks, I mean, I'm quite tall, and you're looking out of that window at my height, and you're still having to look up to go out to look outside of it. So, nah, not for me. It's just absolutely diabolical, isn't it? You can, the fact that you can only get a single bed in it as well means they must have mostly thought that the men there were single. So I don't know what the intentions were, unless the oil rig was near this site, and they didn't actually stay on the oil rig, or that wouldn't have happened. They'd have been coming back here, which means they'd have practically would have been living here then, which makes it even worse. So whether they were going home or coming here in between shifts, still pretty bad however you look at it. Either way, you'd have been here for weeks at a time. And there's no joy in it. There's no joy at all. But I'm so glad we got to go there, because, like I said, it's one of those places where you take things for granted until they're gone, and then when they're gone, you think, "Oh, I remember that place." But people of this new generation would never have known about this place, and that's why I recorded it as well, because I thought, at some point there'll be new housing study here, and the children that live there now won't have had a clue about what was there before. So, oh, excuse me. So I think we're going down to a place there that looks like it's got wood. That's like timber framed. Yeah, look, timber frame. That's even worse somehow. But again, you can see how small the bedrooms are. The single beds, all built out of plywood into the wall. But you can tell by the doors they were 1970s, because we all had them. It's like Formica doors or whatever they are. Actually, quite funny. So I'm just having a look in there. That looks like the bedroom. So that was a little honey. No, is that Bonnie? That was a little Bonnie girl. There's Honey. So yeah, you can see that it wouldn't have lasted. See, that looks quite clean. But look again, look how small that bedroom is. It's so tiny. I think that was at the very bottom part, so that would have been right by the sea. Yeah, you can see the sea through the trees there. So that's pretty much end of the video, I think, because we started off at the top and walked all the way down to the bottom. So concrete and wood. Can't see that would have been very warm in winter, and I can see how it could have ended up with rot, rising damp or whatever. I don't know. I'm not sure what building things are best to have, but it sure doesn't look very cool, does it? So then you had to walk all the way back up again. So imagine you lived right at the bottom one, and it's been raining, very muddy, very slippy on the stairs. Looks like there were landslides going on in the rain. And you would have to walk up and down them every day. Obviously, it would have been looked after more if they'd moved into it, but I'm glad that we went though. It's so cool. I can say we did it. And my dog is, at that point, would have been, how old? About 6 years old. So there you go. I'm going to go now, and thank you for watching. That's if you did watch it all the way through, me waffling for hours. But thank you for watching, and come back and find another video, because I'm going to go through some more and hopefully find something from the past and bring it back to the present. So goodbye for now.